Hey everybody, Carl Schoof here from CreativeCodingClub.com, and today I'm going to give you an overview of this horizontal pin and scroll effect. You'll notice that when we get to the last item, which is Japan, we're going to unpin and start moving up, alright? And what's great about this effect is that we can scrub it in both directions, but most importantly, it's responsive. When I make the window bigger, you'll notice that the text scales up nicely, and my scroll triggers are going to update so that everything still works the same way, all right? You'll notice that when Japan comes all the way in, boom, we're gonna unpin and go up and then come back down, and it works in both directions, all right? We can shrink it down, and again, we'll expect it to work the exact same way. The last item is gonna unpin once it's fully visible, and there we go. And one of the most important things about this effect is trying to figure out the scroll distance of how far this races element needs to move to the left in order to get all the way so that we see just the end of the last item. So let me show you how we do these measurements. So using this rough mock-up here, let's assume we can get the window width with a value of 300 right here, and we know that our races width is 900 pixels wide. In order to move it so that Japan is just fully visible, this distance here, what we need to do is get this distance, all right? This is the unknown distance we have to travel. Let me just put this back in place where we started out, and we're gonna call that our mount to scroll. And to get that value, we're gonna take the races width and subtract the window width. So in this case, that's gonna give us 900 minus 300, which is going to resolve to be 600 pixels is the distance that we have to scroll this text here to the left. So in this first example here, this races wrapper div is going to act as our scroll trigger's trigger, and the races div is going to be the thing that animates to the left. The races wrapper is surrounded by these spacer divs with the light background. So let's head on over to our JavaScript, and here you'll see I'm creating a races variable that's going to point to our races div, and then the races width is going to be based off of races offset width. The amount to scroll, as I showed you in my diagram, is going to be the races width minus the window inner width. So all of this is going to be calculated on page load. Moving on down, we're creating a tween whose target is going to be that races div with all the race names right here. And along the x-axis, we're going to move it the amount of scroll, but we're going to make that negative because it needs to move to the left. Next, we're going to create a scroll trigger here. The trigger is going to be the races wrapper, and things will get kicked off when the top of that wrapper reaches 20% of the viewport's height. The end value here basically says relative to the start position, we're going to add on the amount to scroll. So the amount to scroll that we're moving the races div to the left here is the same as the amount I need to scroll vertically. By setting pin to true, that just means stuff is all going to stay in place vertically as I scroll. The animation property, of course, is our tween up here. Scrub 1 gives us a little bit of easing. So when I'm done scrubbing, there's like a second of animation for the animation to catch up. And markers true just means that our markers are visible. So this is how the page loaded, and everything works perfectly, all right? When we get to the end where it's the end of Japan, you'll see that we, boom, disengage and scroll up the page. And this all works well and good. However, if I go to resize the window right now, you'll see that the text scales up, and now if I continue scrolling down, you'll see that, whoops, we only go to the end of Hungary here, all right? What happened to Japan? Well, what's happening is that we're still using the initial values that I calculated on page load. So as I scroll across to the left, the amount that I need to scroll is going to be much greater than when my window started out at a smaller size. So this example here is great for understanding the basic mechanics of ScrollTrigger, but if we want to make it fully responsive, we need to employ two techniques. One, use function-based values in our tween and ScrollTrigger, and two, set invalidateOnRefresh to true in our ScrollTrigger. In this updated version here, you'll notice that I'm doing my calculations inside of a function called getScrollAmount. when I create my tween, the X value is going to be a reference to that function. So this function is going to get executed and we're going to return this value. You'll notice I set it to negative here so that I don't have to set it to negative in my tween. Down below, when we get into our scroll trigger, my end value is also going to be a function-based value. And when this function runs, we're going to use this expression here to get the scroll amount and switch it over to a positive value. Now, the beauty of these function-based values is that they get called again whenever our animations and scroll triggers get invalidated. Now, in order for that to happen though, on our scroll trigger, we need to set invalidateOnRefresh true. So whenever we're done resizing the window and scroll trigger refreshes automatically, what's going to happen is that these functions are going to run again and get fresh amounts. So right now on this page here at this sort of medium width, you'll see that as I scroll down, the pinning works fine. And when we get to the end of Japan, it's going to unpin. If I go and make the window super wide, all right, everything caught up there. Let me go to the top. I'm going to scroll down. And then as I'm scrolling across with this super big text, you will see that Japan comes fully into view and then pop, it unpins and I can just scrunch my window down. And then as I go back up, you'll see Japan is ready to go. If I go all the way to the top, again, I have this free scrolling ability and all the measurements work out perfectly because every time I'm done resizing, scroll trigger is going to refresh. All right, so we always get to the end of Japan and the pinning and scrolling is always flawless. And as a final clarification, function-based values in scroll triggers always get rerun when the scroll trigger is refreshed. InvalidateOnRefresh true specifically invalidates the animation that's associated with the scroll trigger. And again, this was just meant to be a very quick overview of this technique. If you're not familiar with creating GSAP tweens, setting up scroll triggers, or any of the basics, definitely check out my courses at creativecodingclub.com. I absolutely guarantee they're going to save you a ton of time, and you'll truly understand the joy of animating with code.